George Strait has left behind an enormous fortune, estimated at nearly $300 million, a sum large enough to ensure that many generations would never have to worry about money again. And yet, when his family looks at that legacy, they do not celebrate. They fall silent and then break down in tears. Because inside the inheritance of the King of Country lies not only royalty income from more than 60 #1 hits, vast ranches spread across Texas, or stadium tours that sold out night after night. Embedded within it are also the countless years of absence, the family dinners without a father at the table, and above all, the unbearable pain of losing his only daughter at the age of 13, a wound that never truly heals. He had everything, yet there are things he can never get back. After all the glory and all the loss, what does life look like now for the King of Country? And can such an immense fortune ever be enough to soothe the tears his family has carried with them for an entire lifetime? Stay with us to uncover the truth behind George Strait's fortune of tears, and if this story touches your heart, leave a heart below as a tribute to a man who spent his entire life making sacrifices for music. George Harvey Strait was born on the 18th of May, 1952, in Poteet, Texas, a rural town so small that if you weren't paying attention, you could drive straight through it without realizing you had passed through a real place at all. There were no city lights there, no stages, no glamorous dreams waiting to be chased. Life revolved around land, livestock, the rhythm of the seasons, and mornings that began long before the sun had fully lifted itself over the horizon. George's childhood was not measured in toys or carefree days of play, but in hours spent standing in open fields, in the smell of sweat mixed with damp soil, in the feeling of small hands slowly hardening and callousing with time. From a very young age, he understood a truth far too heavy for a child to carry. If you didn't work, you had nothing. No one ever said it out loud, but the land and the harsh realities of life in Texas taught him that lesson in the most unforgiving way. George's father, John Byron Strait Sr., lived between two worlds. By day, he was a mathematics teacher, a profession that demanded discipline, order, and absolute precision. But when the school bell fell silent, he returned to his second role, owner of a roughly 2,000-acre ranch. There were no lectures or chalkboards there, only hard earth, cattle, and work that never waited for anyone. And George, along with his brother, was never allowed to stand outside that world as a bystander. Every weekend, while other children slept in or ran freely at play, George and his brother followed their father into the fields. There was no such thing as being too young, no exceptions made for childhood. A task assigned had to be completed. If it wasn't done well enough, it was done again. Complaining about exhaustion was not an option. His father was not a cruel man, but he believed deeply that only labor could forge a person strong enough to stand on their own. And George, in silence, learned to accept that belief as a natural law of life. Those Texas afternoons seemed to stretch on endlessly. George would stand in the field, sweat stinging his eyes, watching his father's shadow grow long across the ground. There were no gentle lessons, no comforting embraces. Love took the form of responsibility, cold, austere, yet enduring. It was during those years that George slowly developed the temperament the world would later call ideal. Calm, reserved, resilient, and never allowing emotion to overpower duty. But if labor taught George how to stand firm, family upheaval taught him how to endure in silence. When George was still young, his parents separated. One day, his mother simply was no longer there. The absence was never fully explained, yet it left behind a chilling emptiness in a home that had already been austere. George grew up primarily with his father and brother, in an environment where tenderness and gentle protection were almost entirely absent. A child who grows up without a mother's presence often learns to crave attention and comfort. George did not. He did not cry out or rebel. Instead, he learned to close himself off, as if he instinctively understood that showing weakness would only make the burden heavier. Deep inside, the boy accepted a role far beyond his years, the role of a man expected to carry responsibility, whether he was ready for it or not. That early maturity shaped the George Strait the world would come to know, a man who rarely revealed his emotions in public, who never allowed himself to collapse. But what was the cost of such discipline? A childhood that was never whole, emotions that were never given names, a lifelong habit of carrying everything alone, including pain. And perhaps it was there, in those windless Texas fields, in those long afternoons soaked in sweat and silence, that the fate of George Strait was quietly sealed. Immediately after graduating from Pearsall High School, George Strait stepped into adult life through choices that carried heavy early commitments. On the 4th of December 1971, he married Norma Voss, his teenage sweetheart who had stood beside him through years of poverty and uncertainty when neither of them had anything to their name. Their marriage was not built on romance, but on quiet trust, on the shared understanding of two people raised in rural discipline, where a promise mattered more than words. Not long after the wedding, George Strait enlisted in the United States Army, beginning his service from 1971 to 1975. He did not join in pursuit of honor or glory, but because it was the most stable path available to a young man already accustomed to responsibility. He was stationed at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, thousands of miles from Texas, where for the first time he had to learn how to exist in isolation, far from his family, far from the land that had shaped him, and far from the routines that defined who he was. In the military, George Strait reached the rank of corporal, a position not particularly high, but sufficient to teach him the structure of command, obedience, and the cost of being unable to make mistakes. Those years continued to sharpen him in a very specific way, completing duties fully, maintaining discipline, and keeping personal emotions from interfering with decisions. That environment reinforced a trait that would follow him for the rest of his life, the ability to endure quietly. Yet amid training days and duty shifts, music remained an inseparable presence. While stationed in Hawaii, George Strait performed with an Army-sponsored band, often playing at clubs for soldiers and internal military events. These were not places of ambition, but spaces where music returned to its original purpose, helping people stay upright through exhaustion and monotony. For George, singing was not about being noticed. It was a way to prevent himself from being worn down by the enclosed rhythm of military life. It was during this period that George Strait began to form a deeply personal relationship with music, not as a tool for expression, but as a safe space for survival. He learned how to sing in a way that let the lyrics speak in place of emotion, how to remain steady without exposing his inner life, and most importantly, how to let music carry the weight he could not openly bear himself. In 1975, George Strait was discharged from the Army and returned to Texas. Rather than rushing headlong into the risky path of a music career, he chose the familiar route once again: stability. He enrolled at Texas State University, then known as Southwest Texas State University, majoring in agriculture. To him, land and farming remained a fallback, a place he could return to if everything else failed. Music, though important, was still not something he was willing to gamble his entire life on. While studying, George joined the Ace in the Hole band, performing at small bars, local fairs, and rural dance halls scattered across Texas. These nights brought neither fame nor meaningful money. The pay barely covered gas and basic living expenses. But within those modest settings, George Strait accumulated something far more valuable: endurance. Standing on small stages, singing traditional country songs, he learned how to keep time, control his voice, and maintain composure before audiences that were not easy to please. By the late 1970s, George began sending demo recordings to Nashville. The responses he received were largely the same. His music was too traditional, too old-fashioned, unsuited to a radio industry growing increasingly commercial. For many artists, such feedback would have signaled the need to change. For George Strait, it was simply a reality to accept. He did not adjust his style or chase trends. He continued studying, continued performing, and continued living at his own pace. In February 1981, after years of waiting in silence, George Strait signed a recording contract with MCA Records. The decision did not come from a sudden breakthrough, but from Nashville's delayed recognition that country music did not need to be reinvented by abandoning itself. George Strait did not enter history through a dramatic leap, but through a long journey of discipline, patience, and refusal to compromise. From that moment on, the road ahead finally opened, but its cost had been paid long before through years of military service, quiet nights of performance, and a life that consistently placed responsibility above self. In February 1981, when George Strait officially signed a recording contract with MCA Records in Nashville, he entered an industry standing at a crossroads. Country music at the time was being pulled forcefully toward pop, with electronic drums, synthesizers, and images carefully engineered for television. Against that backdrop, George Strait emerged as a difficult anomaly to categorize. A man singing country in its original sense, without altering his voice, without changing song structures, without reshaping himself to satisfy market trends. His debut album, Strait Country, released in 1981, did not cause an immediate sensation, but the single Unwound quickly climbed into the top 10 of the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. It was the first signal of a paradox taking shape. Music considered too traditional was finding its place on modern radio. For George Strait, this was not a victory so much as a confirmation that the path he had chosen had not yet closed. In 1982, the release of Straight from the Heart marked a true turning point. The song Fool-Hearted Memory reached #1 on Billboard, becoming the first has-hone hit in a streak that would prove unprecedented. From that moment on, George Strait entered a trajectory entirely different from the rest of Nashville. Not a brief explosion of success, but steady, sustained growth that showed no signs of decline. Throughout the 1980s, George Strait released a new album nearly every year, producing songs such as Amarillo by Morning, 1983, The Chair, 1985, Oceanfront Property 1986, and All My Exes Live in Texas 1987. These tracks required no aggressive promotional campaigns, yet they consistently dominated radio across Texas, Oklahoma, and Tennessee before spreading nationwide. Nashville began to recognize an uncomfortable truth. George Strait did not need to chase the market. The market was gradually shifting toward him. By the late 1980s, George Strait had become a guaranteed source of revenue. Albums like Oceanfront Property and Straight from the Heart achieved platinum and multi-platinum certification. More importantly, his royalty income began to flow in a way unlike that of most of his contemporaries, stable, long-term, and not dependent on a handful of isolated hits. Every time one of his songs played on the radio, money continued to enter his account, day after day, year after year. As the 1990s began, many country artists struggled as audience tastes evolved. George Strait, by contrast, entered a period of near-total dominance. Albums such as Livin' It Up, 1990, Holding My Own, 1992, Easy Come, Easy Go, 1993, and Blue Clear Sky, 1996 continued to produce #1 songs, including I Cross My Heart, Check Yes or No, and Blue Clear Sky. Notably, Blue Clear Sky was widely regarded by critics as one of the most complete country albums of the 1990s, proving that George Strait's commercial success was inseparable from artistic quality. By this stage, George Strait was no longer viewed simply as a successful singer, but as a system. Radio stations played his music as a matter of routine. Record labels relied on his sales to balance financial risk. And his tours began expanding from theaters into arenas and stadiums. The 2000s saw George Strait enter a phase in which money became almost an inevitable byproduct. Albums such as George Strait 2000, The Road Less Traveled 2001, and Somewhere Down in Texas 2005 sustained his string of top 10 hits, pushing his total number of has-owned songs far beyond any artist in country music history. At that point, the figure was no longer competitive. It had become absolute. Alongside his recorded output, George Strait's tours grew to an unprecedented scale. He performed at venues such as the Houston Astrodome, AT&T Stadium in Arlington, and Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, where tens of thousands of seats were filled night after night. Tickets routinely sold out within hours, sometimes within minutes. Each tour generated tens of millions of dollars, establishing George Strait as the highest-grossing ticket-selling artist in country music history. The peak of his live performance career came with the Cowboy Rides Away Tour, 2013-2014, announced as his final major tour. The closing night at AT&T Stadium drew more than 100,000 attendees, one of the largest country music concerts ever held. The tour's revenue was significant, but more importantly, it reaffirmed George Strait's status as a living monument, an artist capable of filling stadiums without reinventing his image or sound. By the mid-2020s, George Strait had accumulated more than 60 #1 hits, 33 platinum or multi-platinum albums, and over 120 million records sold worldwide. These achievements generated a royalty stream that rarely slowed, even as he sharply reduced his performance schedule. That long-term income, combined with tour revenue and investments, brought George Strait's net worth to an estimated $300 million in the 2025-2026 period. What stands out is that this entire empire was built without any stylistic revolution. George Strait did not redefine country by tearing it apart, but by holding it steady long enough for the world to turn back and look. It was precisely this refusal to change that transformed him into the most durable money-making force in the history of country music. George Strait's wealth does not exist only on royalty statements or in dry revenue figures. It is made tangible through land, something inseparable from his life since the days he was a small-town Texas boy. Near San Antonio, George Strait owns vast ranches, places he returns to after long stretches on tour as a way of keeping himself from drifting too far from the agricultural roots that shaped him from the beginning. There are no stage lights there, no packed schedules, only land, cattle, and silence. Things money can buy, but cannot replace for the time that has already been lost. Alongside his ranches, George Strait once owned a luxurious Santa Fe-style home in the Dominion Country Club, one of the most exclusive residential communities in San Antonio. Valued at around $10 million at the time, the house reflected a period when his wealth had far surpassed the idea of simply getting by, becoming a symbol of absolute success. To support a performance schedule and business commitments spread across the United States, George Strait also owned a Gulfstream G 450 private jet, a means of travel that was not merely about comfort, but a clear sign that he had entered a tier where time mattered more than money. By the 2025-2026 period, George Strait's total net worth was estimated at roughly $300 million, a figure built not only on hit songs and touring revenue, but on a disciplined accumulation strategy sustained over more than 4 decades. It was the fortune of a man who did not spend recklessly, did not gamble blindly, and always ensured he had a safe exit from the inherent instability of the entertainment industry. And yet, it is precisely when one looks at the full scope of that wealth, land, houses, aircraft, and profitable investments, that a bitter paradox becomes clear. Everything George Strait was able to buy was also everything that could not keep him beside his family during the most important moments of a human life. The 27th of June, 1986 began like any other summer day. In Texas, the sun rose early, familiar roads shimmered in the heat, and the air carried the heavy warmth typical of the American South. For the Strait family, it was not a day marked by any special plans or ominous premonitions. Jennifer Lynn Strait, George Strait's only daughter, left home with the carefree ease of a 13-year-old at an age when the world still felt wide open, the future still distant, and adults were simply assumed to be able to protect everything that mattered. The accident happened on a familiar road in San Marcos, Texas. The car carrying Jennifer was involved in a severe collision. When the devastating news reached the Strait family, everything unfolded too quickly for emotions to even be named. At that time, George Strait was at the height of his career, his name saturating radio airwaves, his performance schedule stretching endlessly ahead. Yet in a single instant, all of that was pushed aside, as if it had never existed at all. Jennifer died at the age of 13. It was not after a long illness that gave the family time to prepare themselves. It was not after months in a hospital bed that might have allowed a father to say a few more words to his child. Everything ended on a summer afternoon, leaving behind a cold, hollow void that no explanation could ever fill. For George Strait, this was not merely the loss of a child, it was the complete collapse of the inner world he had spent his entire life trying to hold together. In that moment, every title he had ever earned became meaningless. More than 60 #1 songs did nothing to ease his breathing. Millions of dollars in the bank could not buy him one more evening listening to his daughter talk at the dinner table. The stage, the lights, the applause, all of it became distant, even cruel, because those things continued to exist while his child did not. The Strait family entered a period in which silence became their primary language. Norma Strait, a mother who had lost her child, carried her grief in a very different way, a pain that could not leave the house, where every corner evoked memories of Jennifer. Her bedroom remained. Half-used belongings stayed where they were. Time, rather than healing, only made the absence more sharply defined. For George Strait, the pain did not erupt outward, it settled inward, forming a deep, heavy layer of emotion. He continued to perform, continued to release music, continued to fulfill his responsibilities as an artist. Yet from that point on, those closest to him noticed a quiet change. He spoke less. The distance between him and the outside world grew thicker. His music did not turn dark, but it carried a depth of sorrow that had never before been so clearly present. George Strait's silence was not avoidance, it was survival. He understood that if he allowed himself to completely collapse, he would never stand back up again. But that very choice caused the pain to stretch across decades, like a shadow, always present, never loud, yet never leaving. His family learned how to live alongside the loss, but none of them truly overcame it. In time, the family established the Jennifer Strait Memorial Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to helping underprivileged children in San Antonio. It was not an attempt to soften public perception, but the only way to allow the name Jennifer to continue existing in the world in a different form. For George Strait, it was the only way he could still be a father, after losing the chance to do so every day. The tragedy of 1986 became an unerasable dividing line in George Strait's life. Before it stood a disciplined, resilient man who believed that doing one's duty was enough to keep life intact. After it stood someone who understood, with painful clarity, that some losses have nothing to do with choice, do not respond to effort, and cannot be compensated for by any amount of wealth. And it is from that pain that the story of George Strait's fortune takes on a different meaning. When his family looks at the immense wealth he left behind, they do not see only money or success. They see a price that was far too high. The price paid by a father who lost the most precious thing of all, and who carried that loss with him for the rest of his life. The fortune George Strait left behind, on paper, stands as a rare symbol of success in the history of American music. More than $300 million accumulated over 4 decades from music, land, real estate, royalties, and investments, a legacy large enough to allow any family to live comfortably for generations. Yet for the Strait family, when they look directly at everything he left behind, the feeling is not pride or relief. It is a lingering ache, the kind that brings people to tears not because of scarcity, but because they realize there are losses no number can ever make up for. Norma Strait, the woman who stood beside George from the days when he had nothing at all, understands this more deeply than anyone. She witnessed her husband's entire journey, from a small-town Texas boy to a young soldier stationed in Hawaii, to becoming the king of country. But alongside that glory were years in which she carried the weight of family life almost alone, raising their children while her husband was constantly away on tour or working. Norma has rarely appeared in the media and has almost never spoken publicly about her private life. Yet in a rare moment shared with close family, she once admitted, "George has always been a responsible man, but that responsibility sometimes took away from our family time that we can never get back." For Norma, money was never the goal. She grew up in the same kind of world as George, a place where presence mattered more than possessions. So when she looks at the vast fortune he accumulated, what she sees is not financial security, but a map of years that passed in silence. Every sprawling ranch, every profitable investment, every sold-out tour is tied to George's absence from the family, dinners without a father, private moments that money could never replace. That pain cuts even deeper, because the Strait family has always lived with the memory of Jennifer Lynn Strait, their only daughter, who passed away at the age of 13. For Norma, losing a child was not only the loss of a daughter, but the loss of a part of the family's soul. In their Texas home, traces of Jennifer never fully disappeared. Small keepsakes were carefully preserved. Stories about her were still shared within the family, even if not always spoken aloud. Jennifer's presence now exists in memory, fragile, yet never fading. George Strait himself, despite his iron discipline, was not spared from that pain. Those close to him have said that after the tragedy of 1986, he became far more withdrawn when he was with family. Not in a way that was openly visible, but as a deep, heavy weight, as if he constantly carried the feeling that he had missed something essential. There were evenings when he sat alone at his ranch, saying almost nothing, quietly staring out across the open land. A close friend once recalled George saying, in a rare moment of honesty, "I can stand in front of tens of thousands of people and still feel like I'm missing something no stage can fill." His son, George Bubba Strait Jr., witnessed that inner conflict more clearly than anyone. Bubba grew up in the enormous shadow of his father, a living legend, while also having to accept George's frequent absence during his early years. Later, when Bubba grew older and began working alongside his father in music, their relationship slowly healed in a very personal way. Bubba has shared that writing songs and standing on stage with his father was not only a source of pride, but also a way for them to make up for years when they could not be together enough. Even so, that late closeness could not erase the sense of regret. For Bubba, the fortune his father left behind carries a dual meaning. On one hand, it provides security for the family's future. On the other, it is an unavoidable reminder of the price everyone paid. In a private conversation, Bubba once said, "My father never let our family go without, but there are things he could never give back, no matter how much he wanted to." Other members of the Strait family, siblings and relatives, share much the same feeling. They are proud of George Strait as a cultural icon of America. But from a family perspective, they see a very different man. someone who always tried to fulfill his responsibilities, yet could never divide himself equally between the world and his family. Rare family gatherings became deeply precious because everyone understood that time together was growing increasingly scarce and that no amount of money could buy more of it. When people say that George Strait's family broke down in tears when faced with the fortune he left behind, it is not an image of despair or regret. It is the sound of delayed understanding. They cry because they recognize that the entire legacy was built on sacrifices that lasted a lifetime. Not only George's sacrifices, but also those of the people who stood behind him, quietly enduring, waiting, and accepting. That fortune is proof of George Strait's greatness to the outside world. But to his family, it resembles a final ledger, recording every chapter of a life lived, both light and shadow. Each number represents not only success, but moments that can never be reclaimed. Their children's childhoods, family evenings, and a child who remains forever 13. And perhaps that is why those tears are never tears of resentment. They are tears of love. Love strong enough to understand that George Strait did everything he knew how to do, shaped by the lessons life taught him from an early age. But also love deep enough to accept a painful truth that some losses, even when wrapped in gold and fame, remain empty spaces that can never be filled. George Strait completed a vast circle of life, from a rural Texas boy to the king of country holding an immense fortune, only to realize in the end that what matters most is not stored in a bank, but in moments with family that can never be relived. If the story of George Strait's fortune of tears made you pause, even for a moment, please like the video to support the channel, leave a heart as a tribute to what he sacrificed, and share your thoughts in the comments. In your view, is success worth such a price? And don't forget to subscribe to continue following us through the stories that come next.